Under the sweltering Texas sun, traffic on Highway 83 slowed to a crawl, but not because of an accident. Something much smaller, much wilder, had brought cars to a halt. A tiny bobcat kitten, desperate and determined, blocked the road, refusing to retreat. Officer Sarah Winters had seen her share of strange calls, but nothing quite like this. As she approached the trembling creature, she realized it wasn't just lost or injured. It was trying to tell them something, and when she saw the glint of metal strapped to its leg, she knew. Somewhere beyond the horizon, a mystery was waiting for her to find out. The summer sun beat down on Highway 83 in the West Texas countryside, creating shimmering mirages on the asphalt. Traffic moved steadily, the usual flow of trucks and cars heading north toward Abilene or south to San Angelo, their passengers oblivious to the drama unfolding on the roadside. Officer Sarah Winters adjusted her Stetson against the glare, squinting at the dispatch notes on her cruiser screen. At 34, she'd been with the Texas Department of Public Safety for 11 years, and rarely did wildlife calls warrant immediate attention. But something about this one felt different. Dispatch, this is Unit 247 responding to the wildlife incident at Highway 83, mile marker 143, ETA 3 minutes, she reported. Roger that, Officer Winters. Be advised we've had additional calls, motorists reporting what appears to be a juvenile bobcat displaying unusual behavior. She spotted the commotion before she reached the mile marker. A cluster of vehicles pulled onto the shoulder, drivers standing outside their cars, pointing and taking photos. As she stepped out of her cruiser, the hot air hit her like a physical force. She approached a middle-aged man in a faded Dallas Cowboys t-shirt. "Afternoon, sir. Officer Sarah Winters, DPS. Can you tell me what's going on?" The man wiped sweat from his brow. "Ma'am, there's a baby bobcat over yonder," he said, pointing toward the median. "Been trying to cross for about 20 minutes now. Almost caused 2 pileups when a semi braked hard to avoid it." Sarah walked carefully toward the median, hand resting instinctively on her holster. Then she saw it, a small bobcat kitten, its spotted coat dusty from the roadside. It paced nervously at the edge of the median, making small darting movements toward the roadway before retreating when vehicles approached. There was something off about its behavior. This wasn't an animal randomly crossing a road. It seemed deliberate, almost frantic. She raised her binoculars for a closer look, and that's when she noticed it. A small device attached to the cat's hind leg with what appeared to be a blue marker. The bobcat wasn't wild, or at least not entirely. Sarah called the Regional Fish and Wildlife Office. Within 20 minutes, Dr. Stephen Mitchell arrived, a wiry man in his 50s with sun-weathered skin and alert eyes. He'd been the regional wildlife biologist for over 2 decades. "Call me Stephen," he said, shaking her hand. Dispatch mentioned a tagged bobcat. "That's unusual enough to get me moving." They approached the median carefully. Stephen raised his binoculars, adjusting the focus. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "That's not one of ours. Wildlife Services uses specific tracking collars, usually around the neck." The bobcat spotted them and, instead of running away, moved closer, stopping about 30 feet from them. It made a small, urgent sound, then turned and took a few steps toward the forest that bordered the highway, looking back at them. "It wants us to follow it," Stephen said, amazement in his voice. He focused intently on the device through the binoculars. "There's a number on it, RW7734. His face paled slightly. "Sarah, that's not a wildlife tag. That's an emergency location marker, usually issued to hikers." Why would a bobcat have a hiker's location marker? Stephen made a quick call, returning with a grave expression. I just spoke with the ranger station at Fortress Ridge State Park. They've had a missing hiker since yesterday. Robert Whitley, 42, experienced outdoorsman. He missed his scheduled check-in last night. And the marker number matches? Our W are his initials, and 7734 was his campsite registration. And here's the thing. Robert Whitley is a wildlife rehabilitator from Austin, specializes in big cats. They both looked at the bobcat, which was still waiting, occasionally making that same urgent sound. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed that this was insane. Follow a wild animal into the forest based on nothing but unusual behavior? I'm going to follow it, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Stephen stared at her. Sarah, if we're wrong, if that animal is just confused, we could be wasting critical time. Robert could be dying while we chase a bobcat through the woods. And if we're right? Sarah shot back. If that animal really is trying to lead us to him and we ignore it? The bobcat made that sound again, more insistent now. Almost pleading. I've worked with wildlife for 25 years, Stephen said, his jaw tight. What you're suggesting goes against everything I know. Wild animals don't do this. But rehabilitated ones might, Sarah countered. What if he trained it somehow? That's a hell of a gamble. It's the only gamble we've got. Sarah radioed dispatch, requesting backup and search and rescue on standby. Be advised, nearest backup is 30 minutes out, dispatch responded. 30 minutes. If they were wrong, that was 30 minutes Robert Whitley didn't have. Stephen grabbed his medical supply backpack, his movements sharp. 20 minutes. If we don't find anything, we turn back and call in a full grid search. The bobcat, seeming to sense their decision, turned and trotted toward the tree line, stopping at the forest edge to look back one more time. Those golden eyes locked onto Sarah's, and in that moment, she saw something that made her blood run cold, not wildness, but intelligence. Purpose. Desperation. God help us if we're wrong, Stephen muttered. As they entered the forest, the temperature dropped noticeably under the canopy. The sounds of the highway faded, replaced by rustling leaves and distant bird calls. Ahead, always just visible through the trees, the spotted form of the bobcat moved with purpose. Sarah's hand dropped to her sidearm. Not for the bobcat, for whatever else they might find. It's staying on a clear path, Stephen observed, his voice tight. That's not typical behavior. Was that reassuring or terrifying? Sarah couldn't decide. There, she pointed, her pulse quickening. Boot prints. Recent ones. Stephen knelt to examine them, and when he looked up, the skepticism was gone. These are fresh. Maybe a day old. Men's hiking boot. They were on the right track. Or following a bobcat that happened to walk the same path a hiker had taken yesterday. There was no way to know which. The bobcat moved faster now, and Sarah's legs burned as they pushed through underbrush. How much time did they have left? How much time did Robert have? Then the forest opened into a clearing, and Sarah's breath caught. The undergrowth was torn apart, broken branches, flattened grass, scattered personal items. A water bottle, a torn backpack strap, and on several leaves, dried blood. Oh God, Stephen breathed. The bobcat had stopped at the far edge, pacing, agitated. It approached something Sarah hadn't noticed, a steep drop-off, partially concealed by vegetation. They moved to the edge, and Sarah's stomach dropped. Below was a ravine, about 30 feet deep. And there, partially concealed by a fallen tree, was a human form. Motionless. "Robert!" Stephen called out, his voice cracking. For 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, nothing happened. They were too late. Then the figure moved. Slowly. Painfully. An arm raised. "He's alive," Sarah gasped into her radio. "Dispatch, we've located the missing hiker. Ravine approximately 1 mile east of Highway 83 at mile marker 143. Subject is alive but injured. Requesting immediate medical evacuation." "Copy that, Officer Winters. Be 45 minutes. They descended carefully, and when Sarah's boots finally hit solid ground, she ran to the fallen tree. Robert Whitley was trapped beneath it, his right leg pinned at an unnatural angle. His face was gray, his lips cracked from dehydration. But when the Bobcat approached, those eyes focused, and a weak smile crossed his face. "Nova," he whispered, his voice like sandpaper. "Good girl. I knew you'd bring them." The Bobcat, Nova, nuzzled against Robert's outstretched hand. Stephen was already working, checking vital signs, setting up in 4. Compound fracture of the right tibia, possible concussion, severe dehydration, but stable. "Robert, can you tell us what happened?" Robert's eyes struggled to focus. Each word seemed to cost him. "Storm. Yesterday. Lightning. Tree fell. Couldn't reach beacon. So I gave Nova my marker. Told her roads mean help. Told her find people." His eyes filled with tears. Didn't know if she'd remember. "She remembered," Sarah said, her voice thick. "And we saw. You're going to be okay." Nova settled next to Robert, her body pressed against his side, and didn't move, guarding him, just as she'd been doing since the tree had fallen. Sarah thought, we almost didn't follow. 5 more minutes of doubt, and Robert Whitley would have died alone in this ravine. When the rescue team finally arrived and Robert was lifted to safety, Sarah stood at the bottom of that ravine with Stephen, watching Nova. "You know what the odds were of this working?" Stephen said quietly. "Don't tell me," Sarah said. "I don't want to know how close we came to making the wrong choice. We didn't, though. When it counted, we trusted something we couldn't understand. And because of that, a man's alive." Nova turned to look at them, those golden eyes meeting Sarah's once more. "Thank you," Sarah whispered. 3 weeks later, Sarah visited the Austin Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where Robert worked. She found him in a wheelchair, his casted leg propped up, but his color had returned. "Officer Winters," he smiled. "It's good to finally meet you properly. Call me Sarah, please. How is she?" Robert's face lit up. "Why don't you see for yourself?" He wheeled himself out to a large enclosure where Dr. Mitchell was waiting. Inside, Nova was exploring, her movements graceful and precise. She'd grown noticeably, her kitten proportions giving way to adolescence. Nova immediately noticed them and approached, focusing particularly on Sarah. "She remembers you," Robert said with surprise. "What happens to her now?" Sarah asked. Robert exchanged a glance with Stephen. "Nova's case has challenged everything we thought we knew. We're developing a new program, Wildlife Ambassadors, animals that can teach us about their species while helping with conservation education." "And Nova would be your first ambassador?" "She's perfect," Robert confirmed. "The publicity from the rescue has brought in enough donations to fund our ambassador program for the next 3 years. The governor's office wants to present both of you with a special commendation next month," Stephen added. Sarah smiled, remembering the small, desperate Bobcat that had blocked traffic. Robert offered Sarah a pair of long tongs with meat to feed Nova. She extended it through a feeding port. Nova took it delicately, then sat and calmly ate while watching Sarah with those intelligent eyes. "I never thought I'd be this close to a wild bobcat," Sarah admitted. "She's teaching us that wild isn't as simple a concept as we once thought," Robert said. "Nova is helping us understand that the line between wild and tame isn't as clear-cut as we imagined." 6 months later, Sarah attended the grand opening of the Texas Wildlife Ambassador Center. The facility was impressive, with naturalistic habitats designed to give animals space while allowing visitors to observe them. Nova's habitat was the centerpiece, a spacious enclosure designed to mimic her natural environment. Robert, now fully recovered, led the ribbon-cutting ceremony. When he mentioned Sarah's role in the rescue, he insisted she join him at the podium. Officer Winters represented the best of human compassion that day, he told the crowd. She recognized intelligence and intent, even when it came in an unexpected form. As the sun began to set, Sarah stood at the observation glass watching Nova lounge on a rock outcropping. Robert joined her. "One bobcat has done more for Texas wildlife conservation in 6 months than a decade of traditional campaigns." "You know," Sarah said finally, "in 11 years of police work, I've never had a case quite like this one." Robert laughed. "I should hope not. Once in a lifetime is enough for me." In the fading light, Nova rose and approached the observation glass where Sarah stood. For a moment, those golden eyes met hers, and Sarah felt again that inexplicable connection. A bridge between two worlds, wild and human, each with lessons to teach the other. It was, Sarah thought, a fitting end to an extraordinary story. And perhaps the beginning of many more. Did you enjoy this story? What would you have done in Sarah's place? Followed the bobcat into the unknown? Or called for a full search team and played it safe? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.